The Famous Five, written by Erin Blyton. Book number 1, Five on a Treasure Island. Chapter 2, The Strange Cousin. The children's aunt had been watching for the car. She came running out of the old wooden door as soon as she saw it draw up outside. The children liked the look of her at once. "Welcome to Kirin," she cried. "Hello, all of you. It's lovely to see you." There were kisses all around, and then the children went into the house. They liked it. It felt old and a bit mysterious, and the furniture was old and very beautiful. "Where's Georgiana?" asked Anne, looking around for her unknown cousin. "Oh, the naughty girl! I told her to wait in the garden for you," said her aunt. "Now she's gone off somewhere. I must tell you, children, you may find George a bit difficult at first. She's always been one on her own, you know, and at first may not like you being here. But you mustn't take any notice of that. She'll be all right in a short time. I'm very glad for George's sake that you were able to come. She badly needs other children to play with." "Do you call her George?" asked Anne in surprise. "I thought her name was Georgiana." "So it is," said her aunt. "But George hates being a girl, and we have to call her George as if she were a boy. The naughty girl won't answer if she call her Georgina." The children thought that Georgina sounded interesting. They wished she would come, but she didn't. Their uncle, Quentin, suddenly appeared instead. He was a most extraordinary-looking man, very tall, very dark, and with a rather fierce frown on his wide forehead. "Hello, Quentin," said Dad. "It's ages since I've seen you. I hope these there won't disturb you very much in your work." "Quentin is working on a very difficult book," said Aunt Fanny, "but he has a room all to himself on the other side of the house, so I don't expect he will be disturbed." Their uncle looked at the three children and nodded to them. The frown didn't come off his face, and they all felt a little scared. And they were glad that he worked in the other part of the house. "Where's George?" he said in a deep voice. "Gone off somewhere again," said Aunt Fanny, sounding annoyed. "I told her to stay here and meet her cousins." "She wants a good talking to," said Uncle Quentin. The children couldn't quite make out whether he was joking or not. "Well, children, I hope you have a good time here, and maybe you'll knock a little common sense into George." There was no room at Kirin Cottage for Mum and Dad to stay the night, so after a hurried supper, they left to stay at a hotel in the nearest town. They planned to drive back to London immediately after breakfast the next day, so they said goodbye to the children that night. George still hadn't appeared. "I'm sorry we haven't seen Georgina," said Mum. "Just give her our love and tell her we hope she'll enjoy playing with Dick, Julian, and Anne." Then Mum and Dad went. The children felt a bit lonely as they watched the family car disappear around the corner. But Aunt Fanny took them upstairs to show them their bedrooms, and they soon forgot to be sad. The two boys were to sleep together in a room with slanting ceilings at the top of the house. It had a marvelous view of the bay. The boys were really delighted with it. Anne was to sleep with Georgina in a smaller room, whose windows looked over the moors at the back of the house. But one side window looked over the sea, which pleased Anne very much. It was a nice room, and red roses nodded their heads in at the window. "I do wish Georgina would come," said Anne to her aunt, I want to see what she's like. Well, she's a funny girl, said her aunt. She can be very rude and haughty, but she's kind at heart, very loyal, and absolutely truthful. Once she makes friends with you, she'll always be your friend. But she finds it very difficult indeed to make friends, which is a shame. Anne suddenly yawned. The boys frowned at her because they knew what would happen next, and it did. Poor Anne, how tired you are. You must all go to bed straight away and have a good night's sleep. Then you will wake up quite fresh in the morning, said Aunt Fanny. Anne, you're an idiot, said Dick crossly, when his aunt had gone out of the room. You know what grown-ups think as soon as we yawn. I wanted to go down to the beach for a while. I'm so sorry, said Anne. Somehow I couldn't help it. And anyway, you're yawning now, Dick and Julian too. So they were. They were really sleepy after their long drive. Secretly, all of them longed to cuddle down into bed and shut their eyes. I wonder where Georgina is, said Anne, as she said good night to the boys and went to her own room. Isn't she odd, not waiting to welcome us and not coming in for supper and not even in yet? After all, she's sleeping in my room. Goodness knows what time she'll be in. All three children were fast asleep before Georgina came up to bed. They didn't hear her open Anne's door. They didn't hear her get undressed and clean her teeth. They didn't hear the creak of her bed as she got into it. They were so tired that they heard nothing at all until the sun woke them up in the morning. When Anne woke up, she couldn't think where she was at first. She lay in her little bed and looked up at the slanting ceiling and at the red roses that nodded at the open window, and suddenly remembered, I'm at Kiran Bay and it's the holidays, she said to herself, wriggled her legs with happiness. Then she looked across at the other bed. Someone was curled up under the bedclothes. Anne could just see the top of a curly head, and that was all. When the figure stilled a little, Anne spoke. I say, are you Georgina? The girl in the opposite bed sat up and looked across at Anne. She had very short curly hair. Her face was tanned, and her very blue eyes looked as bright as forget-me-nots in her face. But her mouth was rather sulky, and she had a frown like her father's. No, I am not Georgina. Oh, said Anne in surprise. Then who are you? I'm George, said the girl. I shall only answer if you call me George. I hate being a girl. I won't be. I don't like doing things that girls do. I like doing the things that boys do. I can climb better than any boy and swim faster too. I can sail a boat as well as any fisherman on this coast. Call me George, then I'll speak to you, but I won't if you don't. Oh, said Anne, thinking about her new cousin was extraordinary. All right, I don't care what I call you. George is a nice name, I think. I don't much like Georgina. Anyway, you look like a boy. Do I really? Said George, the frown leaving her face for a moment. Mum was furious with me when I cut my hair short. I had hair all around my neck before. It was awful. The two girls stared at one another for a moment. Don't you hate being a girl? Asked George. No, of course not, said Anne. You see, I like pretty dresses and I love my soft toys. Who cares about pretty dresses? Said George in a scornful voice. And toys? Well, you're a baby, that's all I can say. Anne felt offended. You're not very polite, she said. My brothers won't take much notice of you if you act as if you know everything. They are real boys, not pretend boys like you. Well, if they're nasty to me, I won't take any notice of them, said George, jumping out of bed. I didn't want any of you to come anyway, interfering with my life here. I'm quite happy on my own. Now I've got to put up with this silly girl who likes dresses and toys and two stupid boy cousins. Anne felt that they had made a very bad start. She said no more, but got dressed. She put on her old jeans and a red jumper. George put on jeans too and a boy's jumper. Just as they were ready, the boys hammered on their door. Are you up? Is Georgina there? Cousin Georgina, come out and see us. George flung open the door and marched out with her head high. She took no notice of the two surprised boys at all. She stalked downstairs. The other three children looked at one another. She won't answer if you call her Georgina, explained Anne. She's very odd, I think. She says she didn't want us to come because we'll interfere with her life. She laughed at me and she was really rude. Julian put his arm around Anne, who looked a bit unhappy. Cheer up, he said. You've got us to stick up for you. Come on down to breakfast. They were all hungry. The smell of bacon and egg was very good. They ran down the stairs and said good morning to their aunt. She was just bringing the breakfast to the table. Their uncle was sitting at the head reading his paper. He nodded at the children. They sat down without a word, wondering if they were allowed to speak at meals. They always were at home, but their Uncle Quentin looked incredibly fierce. George was there, buttering a piece of toast. She scowled at the three children. Don't look like that, George, said her mother. I hope you've made friends already. It will be fun for you to play together. You must take your cousins to see the bay this morning and show them the best places to swim. I'm going fishing, said George. Her father looked up at once. You are not, he said. You are going to show a few good manners for a change and take your cousins to the bay. Do you hear me? Yes, said George with a scowl exactly like her father's. Oh, we can go to the bay by ourselves if George is going fishing, said Anne, at once thinking that it would be nice not to have George if she was in a bad mood. George will do exactly as she's told, said her father. If she doesn't, I'll deal with her. So after breakfast, the four children got ready to go down to the beach. An easy path led down to the bay, and they ran down happily. Even George lost her frown as she felt the warmth of the sun and saw the dancing sparkles on the blue sea. You go fishing if you want to, said Anne, when they were down on the beach. We won't tell on you, and we don't want to interfere with you, you know. We have got ourselves for company, and if you don't want to be with us, you don't have to. But we'd like you all the same if you'd like to be with us, said Julian generously. He thought George was rude and bad-tempered, but he couldn't help liking the look of the straight-backed, short-haired little girl with her brilliant blue eyes and sulky mouth. George stared at him. I'll see, she said. I don't make friends with people just because they are my cousins or anything silly like that. I only make friends with people if I like them. So do we, said Julian. We may not like you, of course. Oh, said George, as if that thought hadn't occurred to her. Well, you may not, of course. Lots of people don't like me, now I come to think of it. Anne was staring out over the blue bay. At the entrance to it lay a rocky island with what looked like an old ruined castle on the top of it. Isn't that a funny place? She said. I wonder what it's called. It's called Kirin Island, said George, her eyes as blue as the sea as she turned to look at it. It's a lovely place. If I like you, I may take you there some day. But I don't promise. The only way to get there is by boat. Who does the funny island belong to? Asked Julian. George gave a very surprising answer. It belongs to me, she said. At least it will belong to me some day. It will be my very own island and my very own castle.